All right, so let me log in. And, oh, that was nice. That was easy. Okay, and then I guess the first thing, I always like to start from the bottom and go up. And so we'll do this RDS instance, uh, click on DB instances, click on create a database. Then from there, right, we want a Postgres database. Right, so just remember what we're doing. We're basically going to deploy our Foursquare application. In order to do that, right, this thing's going to connect to a database. So, so that's what I'm doing now. Signing up for the free tier. Call this thing something, maybe we'll call this my Foursquare app. And then here's the username, right? This is what we'll log into Postgres as. And then the password. I'll just put password. Confirm that. All right, and then this is the smallest one. Storage. The main thing I'm keeping my eye out is this button, just enabling public access. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to log into it. The other thing I have to be careful about is this, right? This is choosing the default security group, but I'm going to have to take a look to see like what that actually sets me up with and see if it's too restrictive. And it gives me an estimate if I keep this thing running. Then I click create database. This will take a minute, but while it's while it's booting up, let's look at the security group. All right, so all I did was, afterwards we're on databases. We see that this is my Foursquare database, and then I'm going to look for the security group, which is this thing. Okay, I see that it is publicly accessible, so that's a good start. But I also have to make sure this isn't like too restrictive. All right, and now let's click on this and see what the rule is. So you can see, all right, does allow access on 5432 from anywhere. So that's great. And then this is the SSH access. So that also looks good to me. So then the next thing we'll try to do is actually connect to the database. So let's go back to RDS and see if we probably don't have an endpoint yet, right? It takes a minute to get set up. You can see the status is creating. And if I click on this, right, what I'm waiting for is to see this endpoint thing, because that will tell me how to connect to it. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for this, we can look at our code base a little bit, right? This is what we want to move to the cloud. So the main thing we'll need, right, is we have the settings.py, and that loads up all these environmental variables, right? And you can see the database password, database name, the host, the user. A lot of this we can actually fill in. So let's do that. I'll do .env, right? And this, I think, is at the same, it looks like it's at the same level to me. And basically we'll just kind of start filling this stuff out. The database password, the database host, the database user, right? And basically all of this except for the host we know, right? The database name, we're gonna have to call this something. We can call it like Foursquare. I think I asked you to call it Foursquare Production. We haven't set this up yet. We're gonna have to do that. The database password, we're gonna have to, that's just password, right? And then the user was Postgres. And then the host we get from here, this endpoint. Let me refresh it and see if it showed up yet, and it didn't. So we still have to just wait a little bit more. But that host is that part here. Now, the way this will work, this eventual endpoint, is that, right, the .env library will like allow me to read from this file. And then we have this DB password stuff. And then the main thing is if you go to the source db.py, you can see this is getting read in from settings, okay? And we're using this scicop G2 library, and that this is where all that information gets pulled in, right? So the database name will be that Foursquare production, the password is password, the user is Postgres, and then the host will be our URL, right? Where the database actually lives. Let's check again, refresh. Still, it is creating, so that's okay. And then same thing here. Notice this is, I'm doing this. I had to fix this today. We're using this getDB function, but it didn't have this argument for the host, right? And if you don't pass this through, it's going to assume that you want localhost, like that's the default. So that's why we need to pass it through and say, hey, this doesn't live locally, it lives at this URL. This probably should be keeping in the same format, like but I don't know if that will work. Think about how that would work. We would have to current app.config to get the DB password. I think the way that would work is in the init file, right? We pass through, when we do create app, right? We would pass through, here the DB host. Okay, and now where does this come from? When we call run, here we pass through here we call the create app. That goes to this function, which then takes these, actually it probably should work, takes the DB host right here, right? And this DB host will come from settings, and then settings should pull it out from our .m file. So this should work, This will set our configuration object and set the DB host. And then if we go over here, we should actually be able to say, get that DB host from the configuration. Okay, so just to kind of go through that again, right? When you call this run file, this will call create app. Create app will initialize, we'll call this function, and this function will take these argument values from these values that come from settings and set them up, like the DB user, the DB password, DB name, DB host. And then, so we kind of create an application that gets set with these values, and then over here we'll pull out that information from my configuration object and put that on my database connection, right? So pulling out those values and putting them on this database connection. And then if you look here, this says db.getDB, right? So this will call getDB, which will return this connection object, right, with the proper information set up. Take a look. Do you need to specify the port as well, or will it ascertain? Yeah, it's not based. The question is hey, I'm not really specifying the port. The port is the same. The port by default is going to assume it's 5432, which is what it's running on your laptop, and that's also the same port in on AWS as well. So that we probably don't need to specify. All right, let's go over here. I'm just going to refresh again. Oh, I could see it already did show up. So this is my endpoint, right? This is the URL that this is located at. So now we can just plug this in. All right, and if you're not sure, you may not be sure if everything's setting up properly, you could print this information, probably. Are we sure that the host that we're getting this? So that looks pretty good. Again, we're probably, we're never confident, unfortunately. But then we can run this file, and then from there, see, are we at least setting up that information correctly? So Python 3 backend run.py. Oh, look at that. Look at this. Oh, that makes sense. So this is saying, we are connecting to a server. This looks right. but port 5432 failed, and this says because the database Foursquare production does not exist, which makes sense. We didn't create this yet. So let's connect, right? So PSQL -- host equals this thing. And look, if I do this, this is going to break because you can see it's setting the wrong user right here. We want that user to be Postgres, so I'll put the flag for that as the capital U, and then put Postgres. And now this is looking good, right? PSQL, the host equals my endpoint -u for Postgres, and now I can put in password. Okay, and now if you look, right, we don't have that Foursquare production database yet. So just do create database, Foursquare production. And now we can run this again. This is going to break again. Anyone know why, right? It's going to come closer. But I think the issue is we don't have any of the right tables set up yet in that database. But we can just try it. Okay, so it's making the connection, but probably right when we go to like /venues, I'm guessing, yeah, see that? We get this relation venues does not exist. Okay, what does that mean? That means we don't have the tables yet. So how do we fix that? Right, we have in the migrations file, my create tables. So if you look at the migrations, create tables, that's actually going to create all the tables. So we want to run this file against my database. So how do we do that? PSQL, specify the host. We have the user. We want the file. That's the -f flag. And that will be data create. Ooh, it's not data. It's backend API. Yeah, let's take a look. It's not here. Oh, it's just migrations. Migrations, create tables.sql. Now this is going to mess up if we did this, right? And it will mess up because we're not specifying the, like this is where the database lives, but we're not specifying the database. So if we want to run this on Foursquare production, but we didn't specify it. So by default, it will run this on Postgres, which will be wrong. Let me just see the chat. You can have multiple databases under one instance. I was under the impression in AWS, can you have multiple databases under one instance? I was under the impression that it was one-to-one, or you did not create a data. Yeah, you can have multiple databases. So we can see that. We'll connect to it in a second. So yeah, if I did this, if I didn't put the -d flag, then by default it's going to run this against a database, Postgres. I want to run it against Foursquare production. So let's just run this, and I have to put in the password. And now this is running it, okay? And if we look at it, again, I'll just connect to this, type password. Now, so here's Postgres, right? Everything works the same. Basically, what you want to imagine is like there's an EC2. When you sign up for RDS, AWS just creates an EC2 machine and like has installed Postgres on it for you. So everything, this is exactly like what you're used to. So when you have this, when we do the /l, it'll list all the databases. Here you can see Foursquare production. We can connect to Foursquare production. And then
So that Postgres you saw there, that's what you created originally when you created the instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was created by default. Yeah.
So the instance is basically just like a server, and you can just like Postgres locally, you can create as many like databases on that server as you want.
Yeah, exactly. This is It's like the instance, like when you create an RDS, you basically think you're creating like an EC2 machine, or you're getting access to an EC2 machine with Postgres installed on it. That's all it is.
I didn't realize that. Okay. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm. So now, right, I can do the /dt, and you can see we ran, right? This looks right to us. And again, the way we got that was we did this, right? PSQL, specify the host, the user, run this file against this database, and because of that, then, right, this was created. All right. So now this looks good, right? And by the way, I like doing this stuff first because then you can just make sure that these arguments are all correct, right? So if you go back to the .env, it's like the host is that, that lines up. The user is Postgres, right? That lines up. The password you put in, and then database name Foursquare Production, right? That lines up. Okay, so you just kind of confirm everything lines up. And then from there, we can, well, now we should be able to run it, right? So now we can backend Python 3 run.py. So this is on, you can notice, right, like eventually we're going to need to change the port because it's port 5000. We don't have that, it's available anywhere type of thing. But for now, we just want to make sure, like if I go to venues, notice we're not getting an error anymore, right? It's like these, it's actually making the select statement. There's just no data in there right now, which is fine. Questions about this? You can kind of see the next step we're going to want to do is think about, and no, this is printing out. Why is this printing out? Because we, in the getDB function, we said print this out, so we can remove this because this is working now. All right, so that's good. The next step for us is to create an EC2 machine and then move this code base up to the EC2 machine and make sure the EC2 machine can still connect to our database, right? And because we're going to want to make our API publicly accessible, we should probably add in the arguments here, right? We should set the port to 80 and the host to, right? This says that anyone can make the request, not just your local host, not just the the computer that's hosting the website, but any computer can make a request to Flask. We don't need this debug equals true. I don't know why I keep it. I guess if we wanted to refresh, quickly change the code, but we probably shouldn't have it in production. And then what else? So now this is running, this backend. So what we want to do is basically move this backend code base over to an EC2 machine. So the next thing we need to do is create an EC2. So we'll go here to the EC2 and boot one up. So we have instances. We got none running, which looks good to me. Let's run one. We can call it the same thing, Foursquare app. And then we choose, we want Linux installed on it. This is the hardware, right? This is the software. The hardware, we want the free stuff. We can use an existing pair, right? I remember I already have this PEM file on my computer. This is that lock and key thing. So I can use the same kind of lock, and I have this key on my computer. That's fine. If you want to, you can create a new key pair too, but this is fine. And this says allow SSH traffic from anywhere. So that's a good start. Let's click launch instance. Let me see if there's a question. How can we access? I don't think you can access Con was asking how can you access a GUI of an EC2 instance, but I don't think you can, as far as I know. You have to just use bash, your bash commands. You can't just move around on the Mac like a mouse. And now let's, as far as I know, then we can click launch instance. And right, the first thing I typically do is kind of look at the security group, make sure that's okay. Notice here it says, okay, we're going to be using this PEM file, and let's click on security, right? And this does say, we can access it from anywhere, so that's good for now. Okay, So now let's see, can we move this code over? So we want to scp-i, then we need to specify the PEM file. So the PEM file is located in my SSH folder. What was it called? Sample 2024, I think. Let's take a look. Oops. Here's my instance. And it was, right, sample 2024 .pem. So -i, then specify the key. And we'll copy. Let's SSH first. Let's just see if we can do that. And then we'll specify the address, if we can find it, which is this thing, or we can also probably just use this. All right. And is that it? Oh, permission denied. Oh, you permanently added. Let's take a look at let's look at that connect thing. See what we're doing wrong. Oh, I need EC2 user. Let's do that. So type EC2 user at EC2 user at. All right, and now we're connected, right? If you type pwd, this is where we currently are, and we're going to want to move the code over to here. So we can probably exit and now move the code. Well, let's do it this way. SCP backend. I think this. I forget if it's like -r backend, something like that. Over to. So this is the code, like the code we want to move in over, and then we want to specify the host, and then we want to move this, not to like the root directory, but to this directory, home EC2 user. Oh, look at that. That's exciting. All right, so basically what I did was secure copy, right? We want to copy over. This is the key that allows you to mess around with the EC2, right? This is our key. Then the -r for recursively move over the contents of backend folder as as this EC2 user to the host, and then to this folder :/home/EC2 user. And then from there I can probably SSH. Like, I want to make sure this looks good. So we'll SSH, again, put the lock and key to here, and there we're in there. And now here's my backend folder. Don't we need to copy the data since we need to load the data onto RDS later on? Yeah, I mean, you can. Yeah, I think that's fine too, to copy the data. We probably could do that later. The other way is just to hit the API, if we have our API keys. But yeah, if you wanted to, you could copy, instead of just copying backend, you could copy this entire folder over. That works for me too. All right, so we can cd into backend, and now let's just take a look at my run.py. I want to make sure this has set up right. So port 80, host that, and then we want to actually run it. Yeah, I mean, we can start the tmux session, but for now, I like, just to see if this thing can get running, you can, oh, look at that. Okay, no module named Flask. So what we'll need to do, I'm actually even surprised we got this far. What we'll need to do is install the requisite libraries. So remember there's those like yum libraries we'll need to install. So let's go to this, deploying to EC2, and see what those libraries were. So it was like pip3, things like that. Sudo yum upgrade, Python 3. It looks like we have that. We don't have tmux, and we don't have pip3. So we'll just install these libraries. Python 3 are probably good with install pip, install tmux. Click yes. And now, what should we do? Well, we installed these libraries, but we didn't install our pip libraries. In the original lab, I didn't have the requirements.txt file. I don't know why not, but this time, I updated it today. Is it possible to copy the files to the RDS instance? No, I don't think so, Chris. Or does this instance not operate like a regular EC2? Yeah, I don't know that you'll have. I wouldn't do it. I've never tried to copy the files to an RDS instance. So yeah, I would rather I would just use the EC2 to copy the files there. Okay, so these are our libraries, and we want to write the sudo pip3 install-r requirements.txt, and this should install those. And now this is installing. This is good. And now the next thing is sudo sudo python 3 run.py. Oh, that's fun. Okay. What does it say? Is the server locally and accepting connections on that socket? No host or directory. This is happening here. Don't I have the .env file? Let's take a look. Oh, look, I don't see my .env file. You see that? So what I'm noticing when I'm doing this is that it says basically it's not connecting to anything. It seems like a database error. And that would be, here's my settings.py, and maybe I moved this. Let's exit out. So I'm back on my local computer. Now let's look at backend. And look at, where is my .env? Let's cd into it. It's not there. That's a mystery. Okay. Alright, well, we'll put it back. I don't know what I did. Did I put... Oh, here it is. I placed it here. That was fun. Let's move this over to back end. And then if you make a mistake like that, you can just recopy it. So let's just press up until we see that SCP thing. And then this time we'll copy backend all over again. But hopefully this time it has my .env file in it. And it will replay in here, this time this looks better, right? And then we'll SSH. Okay, so now we'll check again. Okay, so we're in. Here's my backend, cd backend. Here's my .env file. Let's just take a look at it. So I can, cat, right? That's concatenate. So we just want to display the contents. So this looks good, right? So now let's. So I think we should have, if you do pip3 list, we've still installed our libraries. Just because we did that a second ago. So we should be able to do sudo python 3 run.py. Okay, and this is working. So pluses, things I'm looking for is, it says running on all addresses, right? So this means any computer should be able to access this. And then this is on port 80. Two good things, right? So the next thing we'll try, and don't panic, this isn't going to work. But the next thing we'll try is to basically access our website. So let's just make sure we do it correctly. We'll go back to instances. It says this is the public DNS. And then we'll go to here, and we'll just type HTTP, right? Because we only have HTTP access. And this is breaking. And I did this morning, so this is the mistake I made this morning. which is, if we look at the security group associated with this, let's go to security. Okay, so here's the security group. It looks like, right, but this looks fine, right? We see that, anywhere, but this is just SSH access, not HTTP access. So we need to edit inbound rules and then add a rule that allows for HTTP access, right? That's my web, right? This is only a port, you basically give access only a port at a time. So when you SSH, that's port 22. When we do HTTP, that's port 80. And then we'll say anything can do that. Save it. And then this is the website, right? Oh, and it already worked. Okay. So that's nice. And then we can try /venues. If this breaks, I don't know what to do. Oh, but it didn't break. And this worked too. Okay. So that is basically it. We can show you like one more little thing, I guess. But if you're able to do that, you're good. The key thing, I would say, is try to make sure everything is set up perfectly locally. Right? Like I made sure I fixed this. The requirements.txt, right? I did that locally. Make sure these are all good. The database, right? I didn't add this on the, when I forgot this, I didn't add this on, go SSH into EC2 and create it. All you need to do is just exit out of it and then just SCP again, right? Copy everything over again after you get it working. And then, right, if we want to set up tmux, the only other thing to do is tmux, what is it, new session? I forget, do we have to do -A or something like that, or -S? Oh, that worked. Tmux new -session -s, and then the name, which is a weird name. And then we can do sudo python3 run.py, and that looks good. And I'll do control B, then the letter D, right? And that should still be running, right? And let's just make a request. So this is still working, right? And now I can exit out, and it will still be working, right? Okay. All right. So the main things were to try this locally, right? And the way we did that was we did the first thing I would do is set up the database and then try to connect to it, right? -- host equals your endpoint -d Foursquare, right? The name of the thing. This didn't exist at first. You'll have to connect to it, and then, but just by specifying the host. I'll show you. Right, just by specifying the host and the user, and then you should be able to connect to it, and then call, just treat it like a normal Postgres instance. So just connect to it, -d Postgres -u Postgres, right? This is the defaults, and then password. Okay, and then from here you can do create database, Foursquare production. Get out of here, and then from here now you can set the database, to Foursquare production, run the migrations, all that stuff. Then the next step is to basically fill this out. Remember, this will connect to this DB file. You won't even really you won't have to change any of this, I don't think, but it's just good to understand that, right? These values come from the .env file. And then as long as you set these up, that should work. You want to try it locally, make sure it works fine. And then, after you get it working, then start to set this up for production. So that means, change the port to 80, set this, right? Then the next thing, set up the EC2, check the security group, make sure it allows HTTP access and SSH, and then move the code over with that SCP command, right? So SCP, specify the key, the folder to move, and then this into :/home/EC2 user. All right. Okay, hold on. When you uploaded the folder back end to the EC2, it didn't remove the. Oh yeah. So Alan, right? He is noticing. Like I did this twice. The moving the back end. This will replace the existing code. So I'm like free to do this again. You know what I mean? Like I can basically, that's what I'm saying. Like you can make the code locally, make the change locally, and then just SCP again, and it will overwrite the existing backend folder, which is what I want to occur. How would I do it if I want to upload a different folder without eliminating the previous one? For that, you would probably just create a different folder name, you know? Like just if you want to not override it. Backend 1 or something like that. When I execute the run.py file in EC2 and try clicking the links that appear in the terminal, the page won't load. It seems to only load when you insert a long Amazon link or EC2 IP address. Execute the run.py and try clicking the links that. Oh, okay. I do know. I get this question. Okay. So the question is, if I do this SSH, if we SSH in here, and then was it tmux tmux ls? Here this, then tmux, was it -a, and then that. What was it again? I don't remember. Thanks, nobody. -t, -a-t. Tmux a-t. Got it. Cool. Okay. So you'll see this link, but this is not. You can't just plug this into the browser. The reason why is because this is for localhost. So like from your EC2 machine, if you make a request to this address, that will work. But if you do this from your when you try to place this into the browser, this is from your laptop, and this isn't running on your laptop, So, what you need to do is, in order to like go across the internet, go through the wires, the whole thing. What you need to do is you need to find the EC2 machine's IP address, right? This right here. This is just telling you from your EC2 machine how do you get to localhost, but this isn't saying how do you go across the whole internet to get to this. So you have to find this here, your public address, and plug this in, right, and that will work. Okay, and then make sure you type HTTP because you don't have HTTPS access. Cool. All right, that is everything. Yeah, let's leave that there. So I'd say like go through this